Hey, deserving listeners, welcome to Plathville. I'm going to react to it. Let's watch the show. As I always say, don't use YouTube as a replacement for therapy. If you need a therapist, get one. You deserve it. Let's watch the show.
Sorry, I forgot about that. Growing up as a kid, I really don't think any of us, especially not me, were given any type of a tool set to understand emotions, deal with difficult things in relationships and stuff.
All right, I'm always glad to get some background and perspective on the way that the family was before. And Ethan is saying really explicitly, which is helpful, that he was, according to him, particularly him, not given the opportunity to talk about emotions or to know how to deal with them. So I've been wondering about that. There's definitely some evidence of that in the family. But there's also some evidence where the family did help the kids with emotion, particularly the way the kids talk with each other. Or at least the parents allowed the kids to help each other with their emotions. It's hard to know. Let me speculate about what it was like as the parents were parenting the kids early in life. The parents were probably always there, or at least there most of the time, which is good. They probably tended to the children's needs pretty well, physical needs, food and bed and that kind of thing. They seemed to have a jovial atmosphere at home, I'm guessing. They had a lot of rules, and they were very particular about their rules, but most good households have rules, which is good. But the mom seems to be mainly focused on structure and not very adept at connecting with other people and making other people feel safe and expressing love and warmth and emotional empathy. So there's a lot of strengths that I pointed out. The mom wasn't chaotic, the dad wasn't abusive, the mom was there, the father was happy. You know, there are lots of strengths that raise good and help kids to be developed well. But then this lack of emotional warmth and emotional discussion, which a lot of parents suffer from. It's not unusual. And then the dad, although perhaps a little bit better, a little bit more comfortable with emotions, he seems kind of like Ethan in a way, where he's sort of like a child in some ways, sort of inept in the emotional department. Although I think he has the capacity for empathy and probably does do a lot of that. He was the jokester, I think. And when the dad grew up in his family, I'm guessing he was like Ethan in that they were the nice, easygoing jokesters. Now, those are great roles to have and to be, but underneath that usually is a denied sadness, a denied anger. And so Ethan is talking about how he wasn't really given the opportunity to think about his emotions and to talk about emotions, learn how to deal with emotions, learn how to talk with other people about their emotions, which is really common in American culture. So that's good that he can identify that, though, because that gives him something that he can work on.
Trying to communicate emotions with my parents, that never happened. You know, that connection was never made.
Wow. So if that's true, which I trust Ethan on that, that is rough. One of the most important things that parents can do is to talk about emotional inner lives. When a child is sad, when a child is happy, when a child is frustrated, when a child is hurt, to be able to attune to those emotions and reflect those emotions. Now, some parents think, well, I don't have time for that. Or they say, well, what do you mean? I'm supposed to just give in to my kids? No, I do not mean that. I do not mean taking up hours of your life talking about emotions. I do not mean giving in to your children and letting them get their way. By any means, no, I do not mean that. What I do mean is something like this. Your kid is saying that they're screaming and they don't want to go to bed, and it's time for their bedtime. It's 8 o'clock or something. And they're like, I don't want to go to bed. And in that moment, you definitely have to put them to bed because you don't want to give in on things and give this impression that your rules mean nothing. But at the same time, you can reflect their emotions. You'd be like, oh, okay, I see that you're very, very sad and angry that you have to go to bed before everyone else does. I understand that. I hear you on that. I see you. And then you say, and you're still going to go to bed. Would it help if I read you a story before you went to bed? You know, I don't know, whatever you do. But so in that moment, that took what, 7 seconds to reflect the emotion? And that goes a long way, especially when you do it 15 times a day for their entire life as they're growing up. Well, maybe even 50 times a day, depending on how much contact you have with your kids. What that does is it helps people, Ethan, to know that their emotions are okay. Know that they don't have to make a joke when there's a discomfort in the air. Know that sadness and frustration in his wife is okay, and it happens. It's not a huge threat. I can listen. I can have empathy. I can not feel terrible about myself. I can speak my own emotion and say, oh, well, actually, for me in this moment, I'm kind of sad because I was trying to cheer you up and I hear that I'm not succeeding. And it kind of seems like you're saying that I'm an annoying pest to you, which kind of hurts my feelings. I'm not saying it's a disaster, but I'm just saying it kind of hurts my feelings. The ability to have those kinds of conversations gives people the opportunity to understand each other, know how to tend to each other in ways that builds relationships. When we don't have that ability to know our emotions and talk about them in an uncomplicated, non-accusatory way, then relationships tend to suffer. And I wonder how much they've been talking about how their relationship has been going through some rocky times. And their narrative is it's because of the parents, which I'm sure there's some, Kim and Barry, I'm sure that's part of it. But I would guess that it also has something to do with this as well.
I guess my default is to block things and just move on and busy myself with other stuff so I'm not thinking about maybe what I should be thinking about.
It's interesting, even Ethan's face, it looks different. We see, as he talks about this, he seems to have grown since the last season. I mean, he has a beard, but even just his facial expression, normally he's in a constant smile face, a constant jokey, jovial face. And I think that was his role in the family, that the family really depended on him to be that way and needed him to suppress this part of himself, this more authentic, or maybe just a different part of himself, we would say. This is an important part of Ethan, which is the reflective part of himself that doesn't sweep things under the rug. And as he says, he normally just moves on and tries to get busy and distract himself. And right now he's not doing that, and you can almost see it in his face. And I would see this in clients sometimes. And actually, if you watched my reaction videos to This Is Paris, I saw a very similar thing. There was the Paris Hilton, who was the typical outward-facing demeanor that she had. And all of us know that demeanor, since if you've seen her on anything, you would see her having that demeanor. But we might call it a kind of a ditzy demeanor, or a whatever demeanor, or a famous person demeanor, or a very self-confident person demeanor. But then on the documentary, we saw another side to her, maybe even the more authentic part of her. And her face changed, her voice changed, her demeanor changed, everything about her changed. It was almost like a completely different person. She was just a regular human being. And it's easy to see people's personas, their fake self, if you will, as the true self. Like that's who they are. But usually it's not. All of us have a deeper part of ourselves that is real and authentic and relaxed and recognizes the ups and the downs of life. And when we're in that place, sometimes we look differently with our face. And I think that's what's going on with Ethan right now.
I'm sorry you had a bad day. I'm sorry for annoying you.
So that's good. If you watch any of my videos, I'm always saying apologize. And another thing I'm often saying is physical affection when there's some tension. If you can have some physical affection, then you're in a good place. And so he did that, and that's great. Now, hopefully he can leave her alone because she wants to be left alone so she can work on her website and that sort of thing.
Ethan and I are working on our marriage, trying to find a way to help move us forward. And so to be able to come and just give me a hug and say like, oh, I'm sorry, and I'm sorry this wasn't a good time, I was really, really appreciative of that. You try having a period. It sucks.
Another speculation hypothesis that I've been having is that Ethan, in his jovial, easygoing, jokey way is almost like a child to Olivia. Olivia certainly comes across on the show, at least to me, as much more of the adult among the two of them. Ethan is the one who likes to joke a lot. He is much more easygoing, maybe even a little less responsible. I don't know. But she definitely comes across like this and definitely even talks down to him sometimes. And he seems to act immature sometimes. And there's nothing wrong with that inherently, as I always say. Most marriages have at least some of that variance. And sometimes people will switch given the different contexts. But sometimes that can lead to conflict in that for Olivia, she might feel like, why do I always have to be the responsible one? And for Ethan, he might feel like, why am I always being talked down to? And for Olivia, she might be looking for someone who's real, who is an adult, who is authentic. But Ethan, the way he was raised, has a hard time with that. Ethan might want someone who is just easygoing like he is and not critical and doesn't have moods that go up and down. And sometimes that difference in the hierarchy can really aggravate things. Some of you may have been in a relationship where you had a spouse or a partner who was irresponsible seeming and seemed to be the child, and you always felt like you had to carry the weight and be the responsible one. And it gets really tiresome. But you also probably contributed to that because you probably sniffed that person out because they're so youthful and you liked that at first, but then you hated it later on. Or you might have been the other person in relationships where you were frequently criticized and told that you're a bad person and told that you're inept and incompetent and this kind of thing. Now, for a lot of couples, they won't see it that way. What they'll see it as is the way that she said consciously, is she says, he annoys me sometimes. You heard her say that. That's similar to the way a parent would say about a kid. Sometimes my kids, I just want to be left alone sometimes. You'll hear that from these overfunctioners in relationships.
Now they have those like simulators for guys who can get up to
I'm going to buy you one. I'm going to buy you one. And it's also like for labor, you can see like what it would actually feel like.
Yeah. Out of all the kids, there were 6 girls, 3 boys. I never knew that there was such a thing as a period until I was dating Olivia. They just kept it to themselves somehow or the other.
Wow. So I think this is another indication of the hypothesis that I have around this family being sex negative, being sex shaming, having a lot of dogma around sexuality being gross or of the devil. But at the very least, it's just notable that Ethan has never even known about menstruation until he was with his wife, his current wife.
Out of all the kids, there were 6 girls, 3 boys. I never knew that there was such a thing as a period until I was dating Olivia. They just kept it to themselves somehow or the other. With that many girls in a small house, I had no idea that that was even a thing.
I mean, to not even know it was a thing. So what does this tell us about the education that these kids went through? Usually in homeschooling, there are full normal chapters on health and anatomy and sex education. And for him to have never even heard about it. So on one level, it's like, well, does that really matter that much? But it's probably just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what else has Ethan not been talked to about? What else has been considered to be shameful and taboo and disgusting in the family? I don't know. Maybe it's just with menstruation. Maybe that was the only thing in that category. But I would suspect that there's a whole suite of things that were considered to be disgusting and taboo or just not on the agenda to educate their kids about. What else have the kids not been educated on? All right, well, that does it for that episode in which I react to Welcome to Plathville. Comment below. I'm always curious what you have to say. And I do reaction videos to your reactions to these reaction videos, meaning that I make videos about me reacting to your comments. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.